Hi, everybody. I'm Kristine from the Easton Public Library, and I want to thank you for joining us for this episode of Easton Library Community Book Chat. And today, as our guest, I'm so happy to welcome the uh, wrapping up his first year as the new principal of Joel Barlow High School. We have Dr. Mario Almeida. How are you? Thank you for joining me.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much for not only inviting me, but keep reminding me that you needed me to come on the show. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, well, I'm so glad you could be here. So your first year at a new school, how's it been?
It's had some challenges, which I expected anytime you start in a new school. For me, it was a great opportunity, but it was also an opportunity geographically because I was not very familiar with this side of the state. I grew up in the Hartford area. All my schooling, all my education, all my job experience have always been in schools in Hartford County in that general area. I lived in the town of Cromwell, and I had the job in Rocky Hill as the principal of that high school, which is the next town over, for 14 years. So I was pretty settled in that community. My family still lives down there. So this wasn't just a job experience and a job opportunity, which I'm very grateful for, but it was also, we moved down here. My wife and I have two daughters. We bought a house in Monroe. So even though I'm not in Reading, I feel like I've made the entire move. Not only the job, but moved my entire family down here, and we purchased a home. So very happy. The kids are great, honestly. And that I knew wouldn't be one of the challenges. I've always felt I've been very student-centered. So the students have been very welcoming, very open. I would say the same thing for the families, the high school families. Really, the Barlow community really wants what's best for the kids. And again, if anything, one of the biggest challenges is kind of getting to know all the teachers. When I first got, everybody was wearing a mask. Now we're not wearing masks. I feel like I'm re-meeting people because all I know is their eyes.
Right.
But it's been a really good opportunity, and so far happy to be here.
Oh, that's great. I know that we're happy to have you, definitely.
Thank you.
What's your favorite thing about Barlow? What has been an experience or something that's really like been meaningful for you?
I'll be honest. There's a certain group of seniors that I connected with on this instant, like day one. And I don't know. I feel like I've been with that class, the senior class, the current senior class, like for years. And, and I reflect back, like every time I do a graduation speech, I say every year, oh, this is my favorite class. But really, there's a few classes that are just memorable for the personalities, for the talents, for the group of kids. And it's this senior class. And I can't say I've met every one of the 200 kids, but there's a core group of students that from day one, for various reasons, I bonded with. I went to coffee house and met a couple of the musicians. I went to a couple of concerts and saw kids that are, and same thing for some sporting events. So there's a group of kids that honestly, like I smile every time I talk about when people ask me, so what's been, and I would love to tell you, yes, there's some great teachers, there's some great leaders here, and they really work hard for the children. And those are all amazing things. But really, one of my favorite things is this group of kids that when I see them in the hallway, like they just make me laugh. They just make me smile. I've connected with that group. So that I would say that's probably one of my favorite things.
That's a great thing. And it's great for them too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And we've
Aw.
connected, like we've done, like my previous high school used to have what's called a Tough Mudder. It's basically a mud race. And they had the event a few weeks ago. And I had asked the organizers of that high school I used to work at, hey, can I bring a team? And they were hesitant because they said I'm a very competitive person, and they thought I was going to bring a competitive group. It so happened that I invited some students from that core group, and yes, they're very competitive as well. And they went down. It was on a Sunday, and we did that. I made sure parents approved. So I got to see those kids like on a nun school. It was on a Sunday. They did this mud event, and again, to the point of how I've connected, it was just great to see those kids outside of school.
Oh, that's lovely. I really like that story.
Yeah.
So the book today that you chose to speak about, let me get to here. It's called Warriors Don't Cry. a searing memoir of the battle to integrate Little Rock's Central High, and it is by Melba Patillo Beals. And this is the cover of the book. So what a great choice, especially, for an educator. I love it. So can you tell us a little bit, like, why did you like the book? What made you choose this book?
There's a story behind that book. So I went to school. I moved to this country when I was 8 years old, and I was introduced to American education at Burns Elementary School in Hartford, Connecticut. In none of my schooling, middle school, elementary, middle, high, had I ever learned in any history class about the civil rights movement, about the integration, the whole Board of Education, Brown versus Board of Ed, Landmark 54, 1954. Like, none of that ever came up in any history, all the way to high school. And it wasn't until I started teaching. So I was a middle school 8th grade history teacher in Manchester. And I picked up not only that book, but another book by another member of what were known as the Little Rock Nine, Ernest Green. And I picked up that book and I started reading, which was a middle school book, even though I do warn the audience, there's some heavy duty, there's some tough topics that are, again, that Melba talks about, besides religion, but she talks about the struggles and racism. It's definitely a middle school book, but there's some heavy duty topics in there. But anyway, so I read these books and I was so moved by, like, not just Melba, but this story of 9 high school students selected to basically break the color line at Little Rock Central High School in 1957, years after the landmark federal case that said schools must be integrated. So here's 9 students, similar in age of the high school, the same age of the kids I deal with every day, similar in age back then when I was teaching, and I started doing a unit on the civil rights. And it was by far always the favorite lesson on, again, Little Rock Nine and the story of Ernest Green, Melba Patillo. And that was one of the few books I could find, even though it was a memoir and it was an autobiographical of her struggles and her stories. And they took a very religious, because she was a very religious person, but the story resonated with the kids even then. And that was 18, 19 years ago. I was a middle school teacher. And I felt that period of time, students trying to, again, fight for just equal education, something we almost take for granted. But here's these 9 students who believed so much into it, and they faced bullying, harassment, physical threats, all that. And the story, why this book has always been very powerful, it spoke from a very personal lens of what her story was like going through this. And many people don't know Melba Patillo. Many people know the very historical, famous photo of one of her counterparts that's being marched onto the steps of the high school by federal, President Eisenhower sent in federal troops.
Right.
Or the governor of Arkansas, who had said no. So everyone knows that famous photo, but Melba Patillo, whether she was one of the quieter ones, I don't know, but I was always moved by not only her story, but that period in time. And I remember when I was teaching that lesson, my daughter was in middle school a few years after that, and I asked her to read the book. And I remember that book was impactful to her. And I remember students who I would see years after tell me that story spoke so much to them. And if you think about it, it still resonates with so many of the struggles, although a little different, but although similar to what we are still dealing with. And why that book is still so impactful to me. So I recently, in May of 2021, last year, I received my doctoral degree. And as part of the doctoral degree, I did a dissertation. And the topic that I selected was the open choice program in the Hartford area. Bridgeport has a similar one. And the open choice program, which has been in the news lately, is another landmark case in education here in Connecticut called the Chef versus O'Neill, which was a landmark case where a couple of families of students said that if you lived in Hartford or in the inner city, your education was different than the student that was going to school in the suburbs. And for years and years, they have tried to, again, work on that settlement. And the settlement is included, they started this program called the Open Choice, meaning it provides students who live in the inner city an opportunity to receive an education in a suburban school. So they're bused.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember connecting the two because very much the segregation the students faced in Little Rock 9 in 1957 and breaking that color line, in many ways, the students of our inner cities in Connecticut, one of the wealthiest states in the nation, is very much still dealing with that. So my previous school, we had about 24 students who every day would have to be up at 5 o'clock, be at their bus stop at 6 o'clock, take 3 public school buses. One would drive them from one neighborhood to another, then they would take a connecting bus just to get to school. So it was over an hour of bus rides so those students could attend schools for better opportunities. So that was my dissertation. When I did my dissertation, I wanted to do a student voice of what it was like to participate in the Open Choice program, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and tell this story. I wanted to paint a story, and I did. I had 24 students that I interviewed and that I followed for a period of time, and I recorded and I wrote about their experiences in 3 different suburban high schools. These kids did not know each other. Again, they were just students that were randomly picked that participated in the Hartford Open Choice program. And it chronologically, basically, I followed them around for a couple of months and wrote about their stories and their struggles. So that's how powerful that book was and that time period of the Little Rock 9, and why I picked this book. I've read many books since then on the same topic, but that one, because it added the student's perspective into that time period through their lens, is the same reason I selected the Open Choice to do my dissertation. And it was important for me to document their story through the lens of students. So that is why I picked Melba Patillo as a book. Warriors Don't Cry.
Yeah, it's an amazing, amazing story, and the strength and the bravery of just, a handful of kids. They're high school, sure, but they're kids. It's amazing.
And they were different ages. So we had them as young as 14, as old as juniors and seniors, but they had to be students, but be students under so much scrutiny, literally under a microscope. So no matter what they did, they were scrutinized. So for them to not only go through the ordeal of breaking the color line at that high school, because up to that point, they had to attend segregated schools. So not only were they heroes, Warriors Don't Cry, because she kept it in was the point of the story, but not only they go through that experience, but they had to do it under the scrutiny of a nation, of a world that constantly was looking at how they would react. What would they do in certain situations?
I read a quote from Melba Patillo Beals, and she said something along the lines of, she was assigned a specific soldier who would go with her from class to class. And this soldier told her, you have to be more than a student. You have to be a soldier. You have to act like a soldier and be tough. And I thought, my God, this is like a kid. And here's some guy in a uniform who's probably armed. And he's telling her, like, this is what he's like, helping her through, saying, this is what you've got to be to get through. And as harsh as that was, it was a good piece of advice for her.
Anyone who's listening, if they're interested in this, especially if you're of middle school age, which is again where I think this book is earmarked for, there was a movie that I know you can Google it. It's very, I call it Disney-ish. There's no real violence it's portrayed. but there's a story or a movie. They never made a book called The Ernest Green Story. And it is done in a very powerful way that I used to show that movie to my middle schoolers. And although it was that many years ago, I think because of so much of our nation fabric that has been happening, continues to happen, I think it's still relevant. So
Mhm.
anyone who's listening and wants to, maybe instead of the book, again, the Ernest Green Story, it's you can Google it, it's out there. I think it might have been on Disney one time, but it was well done, and it was
Mm.
done in a way that any age can watch. And there's no blood, there's no any of that stuff that parents might be concerned about. But it does deal with what these 9 students, the Little Rock Nine, dealt with.
Mhm. Yeah, well, it's a great story, and it's timely, definitely very timely, and I love that you chose that one. So, Warriors Don't Cry is available at the Easton Library as a downloadable ebook. But if you want the physical book, we can easily get that from you through the consortium. And this is one of, there's many covers because there's been many reprints, but this is one of the covers with that great photo of the kids and the soldiers on the steps of the school. So, just go to our website and click the search the catalog button and look up Warriors Don't Cry. And Dr. Almeida, I really, really appreciate you taking time out from your busy schedule to come and chat with me.
I'm honored. I'm glad we were able to make this work. And again, thank you so much for thinking of me and inviting me, and to the community members, because again, in many ways, I still haven't met a lot of people. So if this is in one of the ways that you get to meet me, hello. But thank you for inviting me to this opportunity.
Yeah, I'm so glad to finally meet you.
Likewise, likewise.
Well, thanks so much for joining me, and thanks everybody for watching, and be well and have a great day.
Thank you. Goodbye.